Hello everybody, my name is Bolian from VINwiki, and we are a crowdsourced vehicle history reporting platform. So you can think of us kind of like a social version of Carfax or AutoCheck. So we allow users to post any amount of information to any car by its VIN or by its license plate. And over time that kind of constructs a timeline of the car like you'd see on a lot of social media platforms. And because we believe it goes beyond the transactions and the oil changes. Like for instance, when I was in college at Georgia Tech, I started an exotic car rental company. And one sliver of the $1 million in debt I had as a 20-year-old was represented by a Ferrari 612 Skyeti. And at one point, while we were renting it out, somebody crashed it. This happened kind of a lot, but we fixed it, no big deal, rented it out for a couple more years, and after that I sold it. In fact, a couple years later, I sold it again. And each time, I disclosed the accident, told everybody about it, everybody's fine. What I did over time on my own website was I would document a list of all the cars that I'd ever owned by their VINs, so that when people bought them, sold them, whatever, they'd find me. And that's a feature we have on VINwiki because it's kind of interesting to see what happens down the road on the cars that we own. But I found out a couple years later that Carfax had reinterpreted the data for that accident, and they had said that the car was totaled. And that wasn't true, but there wasn't anything that I could do as a stakeholder, as a person who owned the car and knew that wasn't true, to fix it. In fact, last week I bought a Porsche from a guy in Indiana who had the same thing happen. The car had been damaged in 2009, fixed, all good, but then in 2013, Carfax just decided that was a total loss. So he got freaked out and thought nobody was ever going to pay him any money for it. And so I was the first person to raise my hand to do so, and I got a crazy deal on it because everybody else was scared off. I learned early on that when you're buying and selling cars, regardless of their value, the way that you curate the history and document the car has a tremendous amount to do with what you can eventually sell it for. And so I made relationships with everybody around town. I kind of became the guy you go to sell a weird car with a weird past. And at one point, Ferrari of Atlanta called me and they said, "Hey, we've got this car, this guy can't pay his service bill, do you want to buy it?" I said, "Sure." So they gave him my number and he called me. Turns out he's some up-and-coming rapper in Atlanta, and T-Pain gave it to him as a birthday present, and his parents had jumped it backwards and fried $10,000 worth of Ferrari computers, and so I said, "Sure, I'll put a number on it." Nobody else wanted to, and he wanted $60,000 for this car, and nobody was going to pay him that, so I offered him 30. And he was a shrewd negotiator, so we met right in the middle at 31. Actually, I should say my wife bought this car because she's much better at saving money than I am as a young entrepreneur. And drove it around for a little while, sold it, made some money. But I always kept an eye out for these types of cars. And a couple years later, I was working at Lamborghini Atlanta. We got this blue Lamborghini towed in. It wasn't running, it was in terrible shape. But a couple of days later, this guy shows up. And he goes, "Y'all have this car for service?" We said, "Yes." "Can you tell me anything about it?" He said, "Yeah, it's not mine, but it belongs to my girlfriend's daughter. And she's very, very attractive." That's fantastic to know. Thank you very much. It won't impact our level of service, I can assure you. And a couple days later, she showed up. And the reason that for her delay was that she was in jail. And this was, in fact, a professional appearance in jail because she was a prostitute. And you'd like to say that she was allegedly a prostitute, but that would be a disservice to the 3 Metro Atlanta municipalities that had convicted her of such things. And she was a fascinating person. I got to get to know her over the next few days, and she showed up, and I read on one of her social media profiles that she had 50-inch hips. So the girl could take a break while hula hooping. And she was wearing something, I bet she'd call it a dress, but it was really more like a basketball net, left nothing up to the imagination whatsoever. But she was not in a position to pay her $20,000 service bill, so she said, "Will you guys buy the car?" I said, "Well, it wasn't really in the condition the dealership wanted it, but I said, I'll try to buy it." So she wanted $75,000 for this car. She paid $100,000 in cash in Miami 9 months earlier, and I offered her 30. And again, quite the shrewd negotiator, so we met right in the middle at 30. And I fixed it and drove it around for a little while. In fact, I enjoyed driving it so much that I ended up selling a Mercedes that I had bought to try to set the Cannonball Run record. Hence the walkout music, which I doubt many of you recognize. But a couple years later, a couple of our members of our founding VINwiki team and I did go out and we set the New York to LA Cannonball Run record. We drove from across the country in 28 hours and 50 minutes. And so that's another one of these types of strange pieces of information that really do illustrate what a car is. And those are the types of things that we like to see posted to VINwiki. And it allows you to document things beyond what any existing platform would allow you to do. And it's based off a lot of things that I did both personally and in selling cars for 10 years. Like for instance, I really wanted a manual transmission LP640. You don't need to know what that is, but they're really, really rare. But nobody knew how rare they were. So after I bought one, or financed every dollar of it, I went out and I found all the VINs for all the cars. And people thought there were about 200 of them. Well, it turned out there were 26. So when I published all that information and the auction started referencing it, they doubled in value. And I was able to make so much money with that one that I was able to buy the worst example that had a story, the kind of stuff that I like, because a drunk auto dealer in Canada had taken it out driving and crashed it and fraudulently reported it stolen a few years prior. And I was able to essentially buy it for less than I'd made on the other one. So it was free. So we invite people to post any kind of information that they want to our app, and we'd invite you to do the same. Download the app, follow us for more interesting car stories like these on YouTube, and come along as we change automotive history. So to answer the questions that we get a lot, what have we done well and what would we need help with? Well, we've done well at marketing, surprisingly. We started this about 2 years ago and grew nicely for the first year, but about 10 months ago, we started a YouTube channel where me and my friends sit around in our warehouse and tell car stories. And that became the most wildly effective marketing initiative we've ever heard of. And so we've now got 325 or so thousand subscribers on YouTube, and we release a different video every day, and it gets us 1 or 2% daily growth in our app. So that's been great, and it certainly has kind of propelled us into a different space as a consumer app. So my advice to you guys in the audience would be, you don't know yet what's going to make your app work, what's going to make it grow, and what's going to really end up defining the user base that really you get represented by. But that's what this has been, and it's worked exceptionally well for us to the point that now, obviously, most of my time is spent on that and just allowing the app to do what it does. And that's been great. So I'd advise you all to have a very open mind about what you might be doing. You might end up being a YouTuber one day by total accident. And what can y'all help us with? Obviously the standard, download our app, follow us wherever is great, but what we've learned is that our real user is not a 90-10, contribution proposition. Like our most passionate users are more like 1.5%. So it's like 98.5%, 1.5%. So the person that's really gonna love our app and use it like crazy is probably not you in general, but that person that never stops talking about cars. And so, if there is someone like that in your life, we'd love for you to tell them about it. Tell them to download our app. They might have already seen some of our videos. There were 60 million or so of them. And so just please help us spread the word. Questions? Yes?
So, will there always be a human element with the physical inspection? And if so, how do you see this scaling?
So the question is, excuse me, will there always be a human element with like a physical inspection, and then how does this really scale? And the use of the word wiki in our title is really important because we're not preaching this as the gospel truth of vehicle history. We're trying to give all stakeholders, anybody that might know something about a car, a platform to contribute information. And so what we've seen is the types of information that get poured into the app are obviously fantastic. I mean, everything from like DIY service to modifications to strange repairs or, failed parking jobs, whatever the case may be. So all of that comes in. I mean, if a car is used in a crime or an Amber Alert, within 2 minutes, somebody's posted it to our app. So it's really kind of cool, and I can't wait to hear somebody say, well, I want to go look at this car on Craigslist, and I found out that the guy had abducted a child in it, so I wasn't less interested. But those are the types of things that may happen. Yes?
Yeah, it seems like this would be cool to be able to use, like I told with my M3, and then it was hard to convince the insurance company about all the aftermarket stuff that was on it. Yes. And so I'm kind of curious whether any of that can be certifiable, or maybe that's an additional service, so instead of people just posting whatever they want, you can actually validate that this was your car and it had all this extra and it's worth more money than what they're...
Sure.
Yeah.
So the question was, in essence, he had a highly modified BMW M3 that got totaled. BMW M3s tend to have that happen to them.
Yep.
And so he asked if this could be a useful tool to help him get more money from his insurance company. And that has absolutely happened over and over again. People who have used this, rather than just shoving receipts in their glove box, they use this to document everything they've done so that when their insurance wants something to refer to, they look like they're the most conscientious owner ever. So that's been great. Yes?
Do you have any like automated automated into the OBD port with vehicles yet, so that it's like automatic pulling in all data?
Sure. So the question is, do we have any automated data or things like that that would, like an OBD dongle or something that could do like a VINwiki Live that constantly contributes information? We've had a lot of people come to us saying they have these products, they want to just pour in information, but unless you're progressive trying to snapshot everybody's driving habits between stoplights, it's kind of hard to really make that into a packaged, useful form. So we're certainly exploring it, but it's not necessarily on our immediate horizon. One more question? Yes, sir.
What's your model and how do you make money?
So what is our model and how do we make money? Thank you for asking the question. So we've kind of recognized that as a social app, it's kind of important to begin as being revenue agnostic, because we recognize that we sort of represent a very good special sauce for a larger automotive data play. And those have been the discussions that we've had constantly, is just with different potential acquirers who say, look, at scale, this seems like a really interesting thing that we want to add to what we do. Magically and without warning, we've begun making some money off YouTube, which is a strange thing to say out loud in public, but it keeps the lights on, so we appreciate that at the moment. Thank you, guys.